Gonna take a sip of my Coke.
Yeah, I feel that. I was watching an episode of Law and Order earlier, actually, in which Robin Williams played this like crazy smart like sound engineer guy that just like faked a whole bunch of people out, and it was like a whole thing, and he like blew up a music studio, and it was just like,
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.
yeah, baby, we did it. We're back. It's the
We're
Lateral
back.
Show. It's the Lateral Show on the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel, and also just in your ear holes if you're listening to the podcast.
Yeah, it's not like attorneys general. It's ear holes, not ears hole.
Ears hole. Yes, okay. Glad we got that cleared up. My name is Herms. His name is McLateral, and we really balance each other out, as I'm sure you can kind of tell. That's why the Lateral Show is a sideways look at fantasy football. We are here to just break down some really interesting stuff that happened in week 1 of the 2022 NFL and fantasy football season. But before we get into that, just make sure, if you enjoy reading articles and having access to DFS tools and being part of a really awesome Discord community or having access to award-winning rankings, fantasy6pack.net/plans. That's where you can get the all access pass for everything. I talked about it in my waiver wire preview video that I did. You can't read the entire article unless you get behind the paywall. There's so much cool, fun little trinket knowledge that if you had access to, you probably would have made some better waiver moves. So just think about it. fantasy6pack.net/plans. That's what that's all about. And what we're all about here is hopping on our soapbox before we talk about anything about football. So I will go first very quickly just because it's not really that long. It's not really that important, but I was watching like Shark Tank reruns on CNBC, and then that kind of ended, and then it went to the Jay Leno car show where he just drives around in the classic cars.
It's still a thing?
Yeah, I don't know. So,
wow.
But my biggest gripe here, and then I'll just let it go. Whatever possessed car manufacturers in the 80s to think like, yeah, geometry, that's what's gonna sell. I'm talking the Wedge, I'm talking boxy looking cars. I'm like, I can't do it. Like, yes, I
you ever watched
the
Top
suits.
Gear, like the British Top Gear?
I've seen it a few times. Yeah,
there's an episode where they talk about Saabs and how Saabs were like designed by engineers, so they're super quirky because they do like engineering things. I feel this is like same vibes.
Yeah, it's just like I get from that standpoint, like all the aerodynamic nature of the like, cool, okay, like whatever, like that's perfectly fine if that's your vibe. But like in like the 80s, like the shoulder pads and the suits and the like, I get that was kind of what people were doing, but it's like, dude, those cars, no, I can't do it. With maybe the exception of like something about the super boxy Volvos are kind of neat if you want to like buy them for cheap and soup them up and do whatever. Like, like we both know car people that, do their own thing. I've seen people do cool stuff with that. But generally speaking, my soapbox is just boxy cars, big no. Can't do it. Not for me. What do you have anything more fun?
No, I get it. And when I say designed by engineers, of course, all cars are designed by engineers. But Saab used to be a jet manufacturer, like planes, jet engines, stuff like that. And so like they would do things like the ignition would be like in the center console, because like that's like kind of where it would be in like planes and stuff. Like it was just weird things. Like it's a really interesting little bit that they do. I think they do it when Saab like finally like shuts down. It's like a retrospective. Yes, if you haven't seen anyone driving a Saab recently in your life, the reason is that company is long dead.
Not great.
But I am actually here to talk about football on my soapbox, because we talk about hero RB, zero RB, RB robust, RB wedding suit, which is like RBs in draft season are a thing.
Yeah. RB French onion,
Yeah. So here's the thing. The top 5 consensus wide receivers in our ADP and in our rankings, they were the top 5 wide receivers essentially. So I had it as Jefferson, Diggs, Kupp, Adams, and Chase in that order. Everyone had it pretty much those 5, but the order changed.
Yeah.
And aside from Diggs, who finished just behind Michael Pittman Jr. as wide receiver 6, I mean like just behind, like less than a point.
Oh,
That
we
was the
can
top
forgive
5.
that. Yeah.
Whereas like our top 5 running backs were Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook. I don't know if you've drafted any of those guys. I happen to have some Eckler. It didn't go as well. So Jonathan Taylor hit. He was RB2 on the week, but the rest finished outside the top 12. Eckler and Henry didn't even finish as starter quality RBs. They were outside the top 24. McCaffrey was only like RB 16 in PPR. He was RB 17 and a half. Eckler was RB 25 in PPR. Henry was RB 37. Cook was RB 19. Like, maybe we should be drafting these wide receivers higher. Like,
I mean,
maybe not quite hero wide receiver, but it's like maybe with the first round pick, you take that elite wide receiver, then you get like a couple of the running backs that are left in your like 2-3, or at least get one at your 2. And then you start mixing it up, running backs, wide receivers, like as the ADP, as the like draft board takes you through that. But like, I got to tell you, I did pretty well this week. I went 4-0 in my redraft leagues. And I had a lot of these guys on those teams. I had Jefferson on multiple teams. I had Diggs on a team. I had Adams on at least one team. And the one team I lost was my dynasty team, where I traded away Jamar Chase right after I drafted him, and I have a wide receiver problem. My running backs are like kind of fine now, but I have a wide receiver problem, and it's costing me wins. And so it's like, maybe we should be drafting these wide receivers.
And if you're new to, the podcast in general and didn't know who we were prior to becoming a video, we actually spent a lot of time talking about this. We talked about it in February. We talked about it a few times over the summer. Like, I think for the both of us, we've always been RB early type drafters and managers in our leagues, but this is something that we kind of identified, and like I kind of varied it up a little bit this year because I didn't want to go completely away from what I did before, but because I play in enough leagues, I diversified the strategy. I kind of observed the same thing. Leagues where I went a little heavier on the wide receivers and stuff earlier, I did better. My best team, now granted, this is Scott Fishbowl scoring. It's a little bit of a different, calculus going on and whatnot. But like my first 4 picks were tight ends and wide receivers, just because it was like, sure, let's do that. And my team's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for Scott Fishbowl, my top wide receiver was Justin Jefferson. That was my first pick. It's a super flex tight end premium league, and I was like, I think I want Justin Jefferson. And my top running back was Najee Harris, and I'm really glad I had Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring up Najee because like that Steelers game was definitely kind of a weird and crazy one. I wish that was one of the things we would have more time to discuss this week in our kind of look back, also kind of look forward what's going on with the storylines from Sunday. But it's not something that made the list.
Unfortunately, not.
Yeah, but we picked some interesting stuff to talk about.
And admittedly, via the text. We're frequent on the texting. We did talk about how like Claypool doing a little baby Debo impression was kind of interesting to see.
Yeah.
So just file that one away. We're not going to get into it, but like file that one away.
Yeah, keep that in the back of your mind. And also just, again, another opportunity to say you should have been listening to the podcast the whole time, folks. If you listen to the podcast, you would have. But either way, we're going to talk about the biggest Sunday storylines that we are taking away and kind of just busting open and seeing what's, going on in there. But before we look kind of forward at what we're talking about this week, we have a bit of a retrospective from what we talked about with our guest, Justin Henry, last time we had a show. So without any further ado, we can start there. Your big thing was looking to see if the Saints were going to be the team to beat in the NFC South. How do you think that went? Because I've got some thoughts.
Almost. Actually, it wasn't that bad. And remember, like Justin was talking about, it's like, if they lose to the Falcons, are you going to panic? And my response was, not if it's close. It's a rivalry game in Atlanta. I live here. I've been seeing the billboards for days. I was listening to people cursing in the bar that I was at, and it wasn't that packed of a bar. And it's like they care about the Saints game. They really do. And so I think that division maybe is not as weak as we expected. Carolina looked pretty good too against Cleveland, a team that, aside from quarterback, we think is pretty decent. And in week 13, that'll change. All other opinions on that aside.
Yeah.
But yeah, they looked pretty good. Like, Jameis Winston looked pretty good. Like,
Yes, he
Tampa
did.
Bay's probably a little bit better. That's the only thing. So I think Tampa Bay may be, unfortunately, the team to beat in the South still. They looked like just a bit better. That defense in New Orleans was a little bit worse than we were expecting. But like Jameis Winston, Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, all were really viable fantasy-wise. Very few concerns. Winston admittedly still in the rushing upside, which is like a bit of a handcuff, but like you're either picking him up off of waivers this week or next week or whenever you need him, or you drafted him super late. So it's not like it hurts you.
Yeah.
People are probably going to talk about Chris Olave being a bit of a dud, but I thought he looked promising, even though he's clearly the wide receiver 3 at the moment.
Yeah.
I have to say I was not expecting the Jarvis Landry wide receiver 1 game. I thought if anything, it was going to be Michael Thomas or Chris Olave. And the running backs look a little rough, but I wouldn't panic on Kamara just yet. Let things settle.
Plus the rib injury kind of, hopefully he's fine.
It's like a little complicated. The one thing that is definitely a wrench is Taysom Hill.
Why? Oh my God, dude.
The thing. It's still a catch and roll, by the way. Like, do not pick him up as a tight end option if your waivers have not run by the time you hear this, which they will have. But like, if he's still available on waivers after they run, don't get him. Like, it was basically 2 broken plays on that first drive. Don't do it. Don't just look at the box. Like, actually look at the plays. It's basically 2 broken plays.
And like, I've lamented mostly to you privately about this because I don't really have a ton of opportunities to share this on any shows that I'm on. But you're very aware. Alvin Kamara has been on my team in our home league for every year of his career, but that second one, because that was before we did the keeper thing, but I got him back. I've stuck with him ever since. Taysom Hill is just like, I can't, because like, it's only a handful of times that these opportunities get sapped.
Is no longer the coach. I don't understand it.
I thought we were free from this, but then but here's the other kind of tricky thing about it. And then we'll obviously move on to the other stuff because we got plenty to get to, but like, it is still a lot of the same coaching staff.
Well, so remember,
maybe it wasn't just a Sean Payton thing.
In our talk last week, when I was discussing this, I'm like, one of the things the Saints will have going for him is it is kind of the same staff. It's not going to be quite the like Hall of Fame caliber leadership that like Sean Payton provided. But like Dennis Allen's been there for a bit. Carmichael's been there since Payton, basically.
Yeah.
Like, he's been there since 2009. So it might have been there since Payton. I can't remember if Payton predates it by a year at that point or not.
I think he came in around the Reggie Bush time.
Yeah. So again, like, he's been there for over a decade.
Yeah.
Like, this is a very stable coaching staff. So like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't be so surprised that they still use Taysom Hill to do the things that Taysom Hill has always been used to do. The good news is I don't expect him to have any threat to Jameis Winston's quarterbacking whatsoever. I think that ship has officially sailed. And the tight end designation that he has, I think, confirms that.
Yeah, so, I mean, like, any sort of normal-ish league, the whole Taysom Hill, just don't do it. Don't do it. Deeper tight end premium stuff, if you're really dumpster diving, fine. But even then, don't rush to put him in your lineup.
I mean, Juwan Johnson had better metrics. Taysom Hill outperformed him in terms of fantasy points, but like Juwan Johnson, I think, had better snaps, better routes, etc.
Yeah. It's looking through kind of the weird little tandem they have in that position group. There's definitely some stuff you kind of have to be aware of if you want to make an educated conclusion on it, which I think, boom, transitions me super well into the thing that I was looking at. The Green Bay Packers backfield. We spent a lot of time talking about it in the offseason, and I'm pretty sure we, at least to some degree, have a pretty good idea. If you took A.J. Dillon at cost and didn't take the gamble in the second round, the third round, the whatever for Aaron Jones, it's been a tricky part of the draft for running backs historically. it seems like the effective move was A.J. Dillon. And I'll tell you what, folks, between the two of us, we've got plenty of shares, and we are doing
Yes, we do.
absolutely well. Yes.
Yes, we are.
The attempts, got it. The pass catching, he got it. And finding
he led
the end zone.
Team in targets and rushing attempts.
Yeah. So, maybe not quite what we were expecting in terms of his responsibility, but in terms of the effectiveness we were hoping for, absolutely. Kudos to everybody, including ourselves. Because, come on. We are, look at us. Just,
to be fair, I did have A.J. Dillon ranked 2 spots behind Aaron Jones just because, Aaron Jones's ceiling is a top 5 running back.
Of course,
But I have 0 shares of Aaron Jones this year. I have multiple shares of A.J. Dillon.
And like we said, today going pretty well, but Aaron Jones, the 5 targets, not bad, but the whole passing offense was kind of messy. The offensive line was not particularly great. Rodgers seemed very frustrated at times, but thankfully, we did this last year where it was just the week 1 performance was painful. It was horrible. What are we going to do? Oh, the Packers screwed. And then it just immediately kicked into overdrive and Rodgers did his Rodgers thing. And Sunday Night Football against the Bears this week, I have a feeling he'll have something to say about this. So
yeah, so I've got one league where I drafted Dak Prescott to be my quarterback, and then Aaron Rodgers just kept falling, and it was a pretty deep bench league. So I was just I think I'm just going to take Aaron Rodgers so nobody has him.
Sure.
And I'm glad that I did because Dak Prescott is out for a long time, which more on that later. But I'm playing Aaron Rodgers with confidence this week. He might get Lazard back, which again, we might get into later, but it's just I feel good about them this week. I just worry a little bit still about Aaron Jones because he looked as efficient as he ever has, but man, is he getting less opportunity. And if he gets less opportunity, that efficiency only gets you so far.
Yeah, and also you said we might bring it up later. We'll bring it up now. In terms of just kind of diagnosing what the offense is going to be, I think a lot of people do have to remember the Lazard factor was not in there. What
the
this
Christian
could possibly
Watson
mean
factor was.
Yeah, that was a bit of a disappointing. It went right, his hands were right there.
Remember how we talked all off season about hey, this guy is a phenomenal athletic talent. But he's got a really bad problem with drops, and everyone needs to be concerned about this really bad problem with drops. And they went out in week 1 and had a really bad problem with drops.
He is a project. He is not a polished product whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be something, but I think the best thing people can do, because we talked through what the backfield had to do with the whole thing so far, but just so that people don't get super nervous about anything that took place in that, just, kind of like I kind of said before, let's not get too panicked by 1 week because it was, it was a bad game in which Lazard wasn't out there. Clearly the, best receiver that, Rodgers has at his disposal. And plus, he gets to walk in on Sunday night and be the player owner because, not only does he get to play in the game, but he owns the team that he's playing against in the Chicago Bears. He said it. So, good bounce back opportunity on the horizon.
That new stadium he's working on sounds awesome. I'm very excited to see it.
It really does, and hopefully maybe at some point they'll do a little bit better with field maintenance for Justin Fields, the second-year quarterback, because
I see what you did there.
Yeah,
what you did there.
To kind of recap what our guest brought to the table, but not speak for them, obviously, because that would be a little irresponsible for us to do. But Justin's whole thing was just let's see what these second-year quarterbacks are going to do, and I think I can pretty safely say that. I can't do it. I was going to do the whole Davis Mills excitement thing, but it was going to be too disingenuous. It's nothing happened in that game that I really can victory lap.
To be clear, yes, Davis Mills, I believe, was the number 1 quarterback amongst the second-year quarterbacks.
Let's go!
However, as good as he looked, he was still quarterback 20 because he doesn't run the ball.
That is true.
At all.
That is true. Yeah.
That's why I hesitated. Not going to change.
That's why I hesitated.
He pitched a perfect game. He looked pretty good, very efficient, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, a surprising tie against Indy. And surprising tie might be an understatement.
Yeah.
But he still only scored 15.5 points. Like, he looked about as good as he'll look, and he still only scored 15.5 points, which I got to be honest, kind of also how I feel about Mac Jones. Like, kind of a similar mold, where it's like, it doesn't matter how good he is. And to be fair, my boy Jimmy Garoppolo, who I love, as you know, it's like, it doesn't matter how good they are. Basically, unless they have a perfect game, they're not going to sniff top 12.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
And unfortunately, Mac Jones did not have a perfect game.
And we will definitely be talking about that at some point, because that's spoiler alert. Herms has some stuff he has to say about this New England offense. But other than that, I also quickly want to shout out, because I'll turn it over to you to wrap this up, because it involved your team, your boy. But I'm gonna small, teeny little victory. I'll take a half a lap, maybe. I stashed Zay Jones. A lot of different places.
Talked about him as being someone that we kind of liked, and
Jacksonville, they looked good. Like, there were some unfortunate things. Travis Etienne a little underperforming, but the offense was
Trevor
good.
Lawrence still making some dumb choices. Like, I'm sorry, that last interception was stupid. You could see it coming a mile away.
Not great, but it's still I looked a hell of a lot better than pretty much anything we saw last year, and it's I think feel that's optimistic. Fair. And even James Robinson too, but we're talking about the quarterbacks. But either way, like, the offense looks a lot better, and I give Trevor Lawrence a solid B- for that effort. I do.
I think I'm right in the middle with a C. Like, he got to air it out. That was nice. There's clearly some room for improvement. There's clearly also some potential. The team certainly looks better, but again, made some dumb choices. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of really early Josh Allen, where it's just like, I'm just going to kind of wing it, see what happens.
Yeah.
And like, if he does a year 3 Josh Allen, where he totally fixes everything, then becomes one of the most accurate passers in the league, which, for the record, is in the cards for Trevor Lawrence. Like, I wouldn't completely bet against that. But unless he does that, then like, there might be some issues. The other thing is, like, not adding anything with his legs at all. And like, I get that he's not like a prolific runner, but I was hoping for like at least a little bit of like Justin Herbert level usage. And he's like basically Davis Mills level usage. I mean, he's not scrambling.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see how that evolves over time, but you are correct. And then we wrap
Niners game,
the quarterbacks that do.
So Trey Lance, Justin Fields, they both ran a lot. And then they both tried to pass, and Justin Fields was a lot better at it than Trey Lance was. Weather was bad. I wouldn't take a ton away from this game. Like, again, Justin Fields, as good as he may have looked at times, still only 120 yards passing. And didn't add a ton of yardage with his legs, but I think like 11 rushing attempts. So like, that's not nothing. Trey Lance definitely looked a bit better at running the ball, but unfortunately part of his job is passing the ball, and he's still got some room there. I will be curious to see how the Jawan Jennings of it all shapes out, because there's an argument to be made that is a wide receiver he made a connection with, being a backup. But that's not the point of this segment. The point is to talk about the quarterback, and Trey Lance is very much still, there's going to be some rough patches, but we, the San Francisco fans, have kind of expected that the whole season. Same reason that like a lot of us were like Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start last year, which is exactly what happened. And I think this year Trey Lance will continue to start. So I'm not super worried. I'm still keeping him. I'm still playing him. Get back to me at week 5. If it's still like this and he's playing in perfect conditions, then we might have a problem.
So before we hop over to the big Sunday storylines section that we have for everybody, kind of unveiling a bit of a new format for the show, little tight end roundup from that game, because obviously the George Kittle missing the game, I mean, that's its own thing. He'll be fine when he comes back. Cole Kmet, does that
do not drop
you?
Cole Kmet. Do not drop Cole Kmet. It was a monsoon. He still got targets. Like, he has no competition. Don't drop Cole Kmet. Are you dropping Darnell Mooney? Darnell Mooney was like, what, 1 target? Like, yeah, don't drop Cole Kmet.
I saw tweets, man, and people like it's a monsoon. You said so, just don't worry about it. But like, there are some things.
People compare that game to the Niners Washington game from a couple of years ago that we were at. And as someone who was there, we can tell you it's really difficult to throw the ball in those conditions.
It's difficult to be a fan in those conditions, let alone.
You had to go into the team store, which was the only place that had heat. Because amongst other things, I think you forgot your jacket, but that's a whole separate issue.
I mean, I had a jacket.
It was
but
soaking anyway. Like we were all completely wet.
By the time I got home from the game, I was sitting in my family room with like 4 blankets. So it was horrible. So
it was pretty wild.
Just be aware of things like that when they happen, folks. But there are some things that we can look back on and feel pretty good about, and some things that we can look back on and feel pretty bad about. That's the part of the show that we are getting into, our big Sunday storylines. And we'll start with the good, because we did kind of talk about some, not so great things necessarily. So we can kind of lighten the mood here. And you brought to the table something pretty interesting that is not only intriguing from what happened last week, but as we look forward for the rest of the season for a kind of surprising offense, considering everything we saw from them last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of us that have seen some potential in the Detroit Lions. And so I kind of want to see how the targets shake out for them going forward. Amon-Ra St. Brown is clearly the top target right now. He had 12 targets. He is very talented. We sung his praises a lot last year before he broke out, and we're clearly not changing our tune now. I still think that there will be changes once Jameson Williams comes back, but we will get to those shortly. The other thing, which I talked to you about a bit this offseason, I don't know if it ever made it on the pod, but I was like, DJ Chark has the potential to be okay in this offense, and possibly the second target. And DJ Chark actually did okay. He went 4 for 8, 52 yards and a touchdown, and was the second target. It seems that he may be battling out with TJ Hawkinson at the moment, who went 4 for 7, 38 yards, got plenty of targets, didn't produce a ton with them. So I think there's 2 big things going forward to look at. One, is Swift going to be the clear 4th target for now? He only had 3 targets in this game. The Eckler-esque aspirations we had for him, seem a mere dream at this point, which I think is okay, especially for his NFL outlook. I think he's a pretty good runner. So it's not the end of the world. And again, he still did pretty well last week. Despite only getting those 3 targets in PPR scoring, he finished as running back 3 with 26.5 points.
Pretty good.
Still pretty good. No need to panic. Nobody is. But it is interesting to see that he was the clear 4th target in that offense. And I don't know that's going to change. Especially when Jameson Williams comes back. In theory, I think everyone goes down a rung. So Amon-Ra might hold maybe more of a 1A to Jameson Williams wide receiver 1 role. I think pretty similar to what we might eventually see in New York with Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore. Amon-Ra could be that Elijah Moore role, and then Garrett Wilson could be the Jameson Williams role. I think there's a lot of similarities between how they could be used in tandem in an offense. But maybe he goes all the way down to 2. I think Hawkinson sees way less work, but maintains his production per target. Because here's the crazy thing. Last year, Hawkinson produced 9.6 yards per reception. Week 1, 9.5.
Ayo.
Basically, he's getting targeted in the exact same spots.
On brand.
He's just getting targeted potentially less. They're getting 7 targets as a tight end, not a ton to complain about. But I think it might go down. They're going to manufacture targets for Jameson Williams, their top 12 draft pick. Top 12, right? Not making that up?
It was a 14th pick maybe at least, but very high up there, yes.
I thought he was the number 12, but I can never remember where him and Olave go in comparison to each other.
Yeah. Either way, very high.
11, he was very high.
Yeah.
So like I said last year with Jamar Chase, and I'm not saying Jameson Williams is Jamar Chase. He's not. But it's when you draft a guy that high, you're probably going to use him. And so I fully expect if he is healthy and comes back, they will make sure that he is utilized. And I think Amon-Ra is more likely to take Hawk's work just like how they work in that offense. I don't think Hawkinson and Williams will be targeted in quite the same way, but I think Amon-Ra and Hawkinson, they add value in a lot of similar ways. They work that intermediate part in like some of the shortest. It's, it's going to be really curious to see. Chark could, of course, also suffer as he's a deep threat. Williams is a deep to intermediate threat. So my expectation is Jameson Williams, wide receiver 1, intermediate and deep targets. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 2, short and intermediate. Chark, wide receiver 3, is the deep threat. Hawk is the 4th target, as kind of like a safety valve for Goff.
Yeah.
Like, these wide receivers are pretty good. Like Williams, we think is good. St. Brown, we know is good. Chark has been good in the past and seemed okay. And so it's like defenses will have to respect those guys. This is not like when they were running out Khalif Raymond, which I think they're still running out Khalif Raymond.
I think he's on the team, like good for him.
But you know what I mean.
Of
and
course,
then I think Swift keeps his low usage out of the backfield. Now that Detroit has talented receiving options, I think he'll still be a really good fantasy running back, but I don't think he's going to have that Aaron Jones or Austin Eckler receiving workload. I just don't. It may be, if we're lucky, it'll be closer to Dalvin Cook.
And I think, kind of, and also I think you summed it up very well. I'm glad that you brought this to the table because, as kind of part of the, format that we're going for with this show now is, to kind of lay it out, but then, crack it open and see what's inside. I think, at least from my perspective, absorbing all of that, hearing all of that, and, like listeners, viewers, obviously, if you want to comment on the video or something, definitely do that, but also hit the like button, hit the subscribe, that'd be cool. Just throwing that out there, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it, but, feel free to agree or disagree with me in the comments. But we did kind of touch on this in conversations that we had on the show in the off season, insofar as like when the influence of Anthony Lynn was gone and Ben Johnson kind of had his way with the offense, it changed. It was a little different, and this is going to be the influence that's going to be on the offense. And now we always talk about, well, Swift was out, Hawk was out, so what can we really, take away from it? But it was still the same guy calling the plays. And if we remember toward the end of the year, whether it was Craig Reynolds or Godwin Inquibikwe, I think is his name.
That sounds right.
Yeah, like heavy usage. Didn't really chuck it to either of them, but, they did the thing. They ran a lot. And then just kind of quicker, shorter throws, get people open in space. And that's exactly what we saw in week 1 from this team. The running backs were given a bunch of the work in the rushing game. Didn't get it thrown to a bunch, but still pretty good. And then a lot of just quicker targets. So the offense is working out, I think, the way that at least I was kind of hoping that it would turn around into. And to your point about what the Jameson Williams of it all means insofar as what we can take away from possibly reading into the work that Chark got, I'm absolutely here for it. And then also just in terms of what JMO coming into the mix of things eventually brings to the ecosystem, it's pretty clear that they have an offense that functions very well in the short area and in the intermediate. And like you said, Chark, kind of a bit downfield type of player, but Jameson Williams is remarkably more talented, no offense, than DJ Chark. So what I'm most excited about is, and also just the competency of Jared Goff, the fact that he's supported good receivers in the past. He's not a terrible quarterback like people make it seem. When JMO is injected into this, it is possible that, like, not only has this franchise built the team the right way, but they did everything to build the offense up to the lid, and then they have the player to take the lid off in JMO. When that happens, I mean, anybody who took a shot on some of these players later in drafts, because, like you had alluded to, huge Amon-Ra fans here. We talked about this, like, way, way in advance. What a steal! Like, what a steal at cost in the drafts. And, like, dude, and like you said, even if Swift doesn't end up doing the type of pass catchery things that he did at Georgia, that I remember looking at that rookie class when he was coming in, like, I thought he would, in terms of an overall skill set, was, probably the best running back. JT, always the better runner, purely anyway, but I digress. They're doing the things that they wanted to do. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. So, like, we should have seen it coming. And by we, I mean the collective we. Like, I feel like more people should have paid more attention to what we saw at the end of the year instead of dismissing it of like, oh, well, we can't take anything away from that because there was no Swift or no Hawkinson. But it was like, it was the same coach. They laid the groundwork to build upon.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, there was surely Swift and Hawkinson in this game. Like, this team looked like it was functioning the way it was intended to function. Like, this target balance feels right. Like, this feels like how they want to spread the ball around. You know, they still had a balanced rushing attack. Jamal Williams got 11 rushing attempts. He's just not as good as DeAndre Swift. Oh, by the way, 2 rushing touchdowns. Like, he didn't have a bad game either. You know, I think the other thing to look at just when trying to project the guys in this offense going forward is Jared Goff not necessarily a huge liability. Like, I'm not saying that he's, you know, necessarily going to be, you know, Matthew Stafford level, just as an example. But, like, his intended air yards per pass attempt, according to Pro Football Reference, if I'm reading this correctly, was 8.3 yards. Compared to Jalen Hurts, Jalen Hurts only had 4.1 intended air yards per pass attempt. Like, if you're telling me that on average, Jared Goff's going to try and throw it at least 8 yards downfield, like, I'm feeling pretty good about guys like Chark and Jamison Williams. Like, that to me suggests they could get some usage, especially Jamison Williams, who I think does do good work in that intermediate zone. And it, again, like, if you look again just across the field, I don't know that the Eagles offense ended up quite firing the way that they hoped. I think on the ground it did.
Yeah.
I think on the ground they did what they wanted to do. You know, the idea that they got 4 rushing touchdowns, all of their running backs, including Jalen Hurts, scored. But seriously, like, Miles Sanders looking solid, you know, didn't get a ton of targets, but we don't always expect him to. And then the passing game was a little off balance.
Yeah. And credit to the Detroit defense for, you know, stepping up and doing that. And then,
I mean, Devonta Smith still got 4 targets. He did 0 with them, but I think that's as much on Detroit, if not more, as it is on the Eagles.
Yeah. And, you know, and to kind of, you know, flip it a little bit and still keep it about the Eagles as well. I went on and on and on about how I was very excited about this defense, and they were still good. They had a defensive touchdown. If you streamed them week 1, you know, as I did in a lot of leagues, it still did well. But if this offense can perform up to this level against a defense that, you know, we kind of figured was going to be super good, that made, you know, Super Bowl aspiration type moves and bringing in a Bradbury and a, you know, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to kind of bolster what was already a pretty good secondary anyway. Like, you know, like, I feel that we can be very trustworthy in these fantasy options, and I think we outlined it pretty well. But before we, you know, kind of transition, obviously you'll have your time for your closing thoughts because it is your thing. But my last thing I kind of want to bring up, because it's the thing we've kind of been circling around somewhat. Jamison Williams is not going to play for a while, but we talk sometimes about the value of a stashed player on the injured reserve spots that you have on, not everybody, but some people in, like, in our home league, we have 2. Some people only have 1. It depends. So I'll use this as an example as I, you know, talk to you about, and also you're just aware of this because this was literally last year in our home league. It was 2 weeks out from the projected return for Rashad Bateman when I pulled the trigger and was like, screw it. I'm going to stash him there, see what happens. It worked out okay. You know, nothing super remarkable, but I felt that was an appropriate amount of time. Do you, based off of everything we've talked about and seen, feel it is appropriate to do now, or when do you feel good about Jamison Williams being the guy you bring in and stash?
Well, Herms, as you know, in that same home league that we're in, I drafted Jamison Williams and threw him right into that IR spot because I want it. He is a potential league winner when he comes back. I mean, we've seen what Amon-Ra can do. Chark wasn't bad. Like, this offense has potential, and Jamison Williams is talented. So when you take good talent and good opportunity and you put them together, it tends to be good for fantasy. So, you know, it's still going to for sure be a couple weeks. We know it's going to be what? At least another 3 because they threw him on IR.
Yeah, I mean, it's like realistically, we're thinking
But
maybe
week 8.
Halloween,
Yeah.
at the earliest or something.
Yeah. For me, in my head, I penciled him for like half the season. Man,
Yeah.
I'll take that half. I really will. So for me, I would go ahead and stash him now if you can,
Yeah.
especially if you have 2 IR spots. If you have 2 IR spots, one of those should be Jameson Williams if he's available. If you have an 8-person bench, one of those persons should be Jameson Williams. Like, your scoring, your roster needs aside, like let's say you have an 8-person bench and like it's because you have like, 13 people you got to play in a given week. Obviously, like that might be a little
Or like
different,
super flex, because that's
you
all,
know,
like.
but I think you can probably get away with it. I do.
Okay.
So other than that, like, man, maybe give it another couple weeks to see how injuries shake out. I think week 2, week 3, we'll see a bit more balancing versus what happened in week 1. But like, I really want to get him sooner rather than later. I think a lot of people agree because I think he went away in a lot of drafts.
Yeah, but so according to the Fantasy Pros measurement of consensus rostership, I believe it is a combination aggregate somewhat of ESPN and Yahoo. Jameson Williams, 22.7% rostered across in the aggregate, however they determine that. But either way, so like 80% of you folks, he's
That is
probably
surprisingly available. I am truly shocked.
Yeah. So, I'm not exactly sure where I stand. That's why I asked the question. But, as far as your recommendation, if you agree out there, listeners, viewers, go ahead, take, I can't argue with your logic. I mean, there's a strong case for it. Yeah, sure. Because I've been saying this. Obviously, the potential return is a little sooner, but it would be hypocritical.
In one of my leagues.
Yeah, there you go.
You keep talking. I'm gonna work on something there.
It would be hypocritical for me to say this about Brian Robinson and then not agree with the Jameson Williams of it all. So, like, yes, if we both feel that way about injured rookies that could potentially do some good, then I co-sign it. So. A deep dive on the Lions, kind of. We feel really good about this offense. That's really kind of the thing here, and also the big takeaway.
Yeah.
If Jameson Williams is out there, remedy that. Stash him if you have the space.
Yeah. So why don't you talk about your storyline thing? I have to go add Jameson Williams.
Completely understand. We will flip the script and talk about something that maybe was not so great. But I'll start with because the other part of it is a little more complicated, but there were 2 offenses that were just violently bad. This one will be really easy to breeze through because a lot of the faults of it were actually not even necessarily fully due to an injury, because the Cowboys didn't look great while Dak was still out there. But now that Dak Prescott, with his thumb injury, going to be out for a long time, Cooper Rush presumably at quarterback, unless they make some sort of trade, which, folks, I just got to say, the whole potential early season trade speculation that fans like to do and pretend that the NFL is Madden. Like, sorry, the Baltimore Ravens have no incentive to trade Tyler Huntley away. No reason why the San Francisco 49ers would be like, now we can move on from Jimmy Garoppolo and hand him to the Cowboys, because you're not, whatever. It's not Madden, okay? So, like, it was a bad Sunday night game. They were the only offense in the NFL that didn't score a touchdown in week 1, but like I said, there's a more complicated thing we have to talk about, but it was one of the 2 aggressively bad offenses. Quickly to you, before I get into my big soliloquy, do you care about anything for Dallas for fantasy for like the next month and a half or 2, like at all?
I think Schultz still has some potential.
Yeah.
Just given how tight end is, like, he did fine, actually. Yeah. So I wouldn't panic drop Schultz, especially given what you probably spent to get him. Dak is one of those guys where it's like he's droppable if you don't have an IR spot and you have a shallow bench. Otherwise, I'd probably like want to, stash him. But it didn't look great. And I got to be honest, like, aside from those 2, I didn't have a ton of Dallas, going into this season, and I'm pretty okay with it. Like, I don't think Mike McCarthy is a good coach, and that has kind of been my issue this whole time.
I feel it. Yeah, and it's been unfortunate, to say the least. Can you move any of the like if you're a CD manager if you're a Zeke manager, like, I mean, can you move them? Sure, but
you have to hold CD. So CD like is currently a buy low moment. So you shouldn't move CD because you're going to get pennies on the dollar comparatively. I think he will have a bounce back game. At that point, if you don't feel confident in his stability, then move him. But you're not going to recoup your value by moving him now. Zeke actually looked like pretty good. Like
when he got the touches,
when he got the touches, he looked pretty good. So if you think that you got someone in your league that just looks at the stats, not a whole lot else, and they go, oh, Ezekiel Elliott, name brand recognition. Oh, Ezekiel Elliott had some good fantasy production. Yeah, okay, I'll take him. Then, yeah, I'm comfortable moving on from Zeke.
Yeah. I mean, like that one, just kind of had to mention it because it was just aggressively bad. But if you're just whatever situation you're in with Dallas, you're kind of just screwed anyway. And even when Dak comes back, like I said, anybody who watched the game, it wasn't looking very good. Hope Michael Gallup comes back sooner rather than later because boy, did they really need that, man. Like, and also just huge L on my forehead. Get the whole Jalen Tolbert hype train off the rails. Oh,
well, maybe that's who they need. Maybe they need some Jalen Tolbert.
Yeah, actually, screw it. I'm not. It's not dead yet, folks. But what I do think is dead, and what I do have to talk at length about, the New England offense. Okay, like talk about something that looked bad to the eye test. Mac Jones looked confused as hell, and I don't know what they did to. So with
I know what they did.
They handed the reins over to maybe Matt Patricia, but they never disclosed. So we talked about, didn't talk enough about in the offseason. Yeah, clearly, apparently. They were toying around with the idea of mixing up the offense, introducing, kind of more of a zone blocking scheme, not assigning the responsibilities to any particular coordinator and keeping people guessing. And there were reports constantly about how Mac Jones is kind of, having a hard time picking up on some of this stuff, which I don't think is an insult to Mac Jones. I think it's just, when you have something that's working well for a young quarterback, why do you go away from it? One of the bigger reasons that I feel like New England had success last year to the degree that they did as time went along is because they spread things out and kind of built a mini replica of the Alabama offense for Mac Jones to operate in. So to completely flip that on its head in training camp and all of that, the collective hive, we kind of talked about it, but I feel like we didn't talk about it enough. And now I feel bad because it was just horrible. There were like a couple boneheaded plays and the entire passing game was completely ineffective. It was pretty awful. Like no pass catcher, and I'm talking wide receiver or tight end, had over 100 air yards at all. It was a very horrible attack. Jacoby Myers led that category with 90. But when I looked through on 4for4, the only other player that even registered was Nelson Aguilar at 52. And his route participation it didn't even clear 2/3. So, not only were they cycling in and out a bunch of other cursory options beyond, the Myers of it all, but he didn't do well. And because I think 93.9% route participation, the whole thing, that was bad. The other big takeaways for me, Mac Jones, his medium depth pass grade, so passes, somewhere between 10 to 19 yards per PFF, dude. 48.1. Now, mind you, the PFF grading is 0 to 100 with the decimals, folks. So it's like you kind of understand what that is. That's horrible, especially for an offense that, if they're going to, I don't know. With the weapons that they have, you kind of need to be able to make throws in that. And it was pretty horrible. Tackle Trent Brown registered a 55.5 pass grade, pass blocking grade. The center, David Andrews, 51.2. They didn't really do a hell of a job protecting him at all. And kind of going back to what I said, if you watch the game, there were times where Mac Jones, he's back, he has the ball, he's doing the thing. And then immediately he's like, fuck. And just, it's, so I can't do it. And then my last thing before I hand it over to you, because this is kind of the biggest thing that I think we have to take away from this. Because correct me if I'm wrong, we weren't really interested in anybody besides maybe Jacoby Myers as a speculative PPR guy from this passing attack anyway.
Yeah, kind of a like almost a poor man Sterling Shepard, where it's like the guy just catches the ball all the time. It's not like the sexiest thing, but it's solid flex value.
Yeah. So those worries obviously are a big thing. It's a little more applicable to real life, but also to fantasy because, kind of as I mentioned before, the importance of an offensive ecosystem. Everything feeds together, works off of each other. Things kind of have to do well between the balance of it all. But per Dwayne McFarland, I do not like these apples. The Patriots backfield. Look at how they divvied up those touches. Now, mind you, Ty Montgomery placed on IR, but there's not really anything stopping them from maybe Pierre Strong Jr. being a candidate to make this messy. Who know? Like, there's still room for this to be bad.
Someone had done a podcast where they talked about what an issue the Pats backfield could be. And why just assuming Ramondre Stevenson was going to get all the passing work was going to magically happen. If only there had been a voice of reason to suggest such a thing was possible.
And it is still possible, but so far in week 1, it wasn't great. That's
what I'm saying. Like, when we did our show, I talked about how, like, there's no evidence to suggest that Ramondre was going to get all that work. Now, like, granted, did I think it would be this bad? No. I still ranked him in my 30s for running backs. But, like, I mean, again, the Ty Montgomery usage is absurd, but that's a different thing. And unfortunately, I think Pierre Strong will actually get that role because it seems they want that to be a role. And Pierre Strong, I think, is better than Ty Montgomery and will probably hold on to that role. But I just I don't have a ton of New England because I was never hyped about this offense in the best of terms.
Yeah.
Like, Mac Jones is not a fantasy viable quarterback. Again, like Jimmy Garoppolo, like some of these guys like Davis Mills, if he's really good, he could still be like QB 15 at best.
I feel
like it takes a lot for them to produce. So you're already staying away from him, which means you're already less likely to stack. Because why would you, you're going to maybe again, I'm not necessarily super
outside of the deepest of super flex leagues, you're not doing it anyway.
Exactly. It's not like something with like Trey Lance pairing up with Ayuk. Like you're not doing Mac Jones and Jacoby Myers. And then with the addition of Devonta Parker, it's just like, there were a ton of wide receivers. There's already a ton of tight ends. There's a ton of running backs. Like, I had Ramondre Stevenson in our Dynasty League, and I certainly wasn't giving him up, and I was hopeful for him, but I wasn't going to add to my New England shares.
Yeah.
And it's paying off. Like, this is unfortunately as messy an offense as we thought it could be. The O-line is bad, which is a bad sign. Like, it's not doing what they want it to. And then on top of that, even if in the best case scenario for this offense, it was probably only ever going to be the running backs that were worth anything.
Yeah. So to read aloud the tweet for the people who are listening and not viewing this video, the way that they divvied up the snaps, per, like I said, Dwayne McFarland, brilliant guy, over, Fantasy Life, former PFF doing the whole thing. The snap percentages: Damian Harris 39, Ty Montgomery 36, Ramondre Stevenson 25. That's a headache, folks. That's a headache. I know I kind of alluded to it, but just so that way it's out there for the people listening. That's kind of the exact nature of it all. But and I don't blame you. It's something that, and I think that's why even as somebody interested in the backfield from just like the upside standpoint, neither of these running backs, namely Harris or Stevenson, were in my top 30. These were guys that maybe something interesting could unfold, but the Ty Montgomery thing, that's kind of where I'm getting hung up on. So to ask you kind of two more specific-ish questions, with Ty Montgomery out there, literally IR out from being in there, what's the likelihood that Belichick even trusts a rookie with some sort of heavy responsibility like that in Pierre Strong or something? And if he does, what do you do with Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson? I could ask you for redraft, but then also It's not really what we do, but I think there's a important discussion to be had maybe for dynasty managers.
Again, I don't like to advocate selling low, so I'm not going to. I think you have to hold. I think you have to hold on Damian Harris. I think you have to hold on Ramondre, and I think you have to not play either in your lineup this week if you can afford to. I would be interested in picking up Pierre Strong in Dynasty if that's possible. I get that in a lot of Dynasty leagues, he probably was just on the bubble and got picked up rather
Deeper
than
leagues,
being
maybe
left
on a taxi
off,
squad already.
you know. But if he is available, I think he could have a valuable role that he will build in this offense. It's intriguing. And while I get that, like, Belichick probably doesn't want to give it to a rookie, I don't know how much of the offense he's actually running at this point. And B, they clearly want a third running back to have a role. And Pierre Strong is the best option. Like, he doesn't really have strong competition. They either have to go with him, bring someone in, which they don't seem inclined to do, or they have to give it to Pierre Strong.
I'm kind of terrified they just maybe work in Kendrick Bourne.
Because
they did a lot of that in camp.
Potential.
Doing,
you could
like,
do the same with Jonnu Smith. I think he's ran as a halfback at times.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I think we have a little bit of a different read on it, just in terms of I think what I would do, and I'm gonna be that guy, and I'm gonna say it, so that way people can see my face bigger on the screen. In April, I wrote I was avoiding Damian Harris anyway. It didn't make a lot of sense. The regression for the touchdowns was going to be obvious, but now that this offense looks even worse, and it's clear that, like, again, going back to anecdotal evidence, watching the football game, watching the line move to even create those holes for him were not always particularly good. And the Ramondre thing kind of just being a speculative thing anyway, for maybe if he secures the pass catching role or potentially usurps Harris, like, the offense is just bad. Okay,
Yeah,
like I don't really see much sign for improvements.
I would also agree.
If you're in a league with people that are still wanting part of this backfield, I'm getting out of it now. I don't need. I think
there's an important caveat there. If people are still wanting part of this backfield, I don't know that people are.
Those people exist. They do.
Well, sure. If you can get a good deal for him, like,
people talk about it a lot.
If you can get a good deal for him, go nuts. I just don't think you will.
Either way, my thing is just like I would actively shop the backfield and just get out of it. I'm not dealing with this headache because it was already risky enough to begin with. But if even with marginal improvement, like the right side of the line, going back to the PFF grades and stuff, like if you're interested in that and find that to be valuable, cool. I do. The right side of the line was actually pretty good. It was mostly on the left side that it was a little kind of wonky, and especially for the athletic tight end, the tight ends, linemen and stuff. Like, you're gonna have to move around and do some assignments and different stuff anyway. I don't know. I'm nervous the unit is going to become cohesive enough by even mid-season for it to be worth it. There are people that still believe very heavily in Ramondre being able to do, like, the things we talked about, the narratives that, like, even got me excited about what could have possibly happened. If those people exist, find those people and say, here, that's your problem now. Because I think there are enough people that would be willing to, and that's kind of why we have this model for the show now, I think, is for us to look through things and, kind of just do like a, finger to the wind, see which way it's blowing. We talked about one thing we're very happy about that we feel pretty secure in our thoughts about. For me, this is something that I feel pretty awful about. I feel pretty secure in my, this offense is lost for fantasy. I don't care about any of them. If you roster any of them, please get out of it. Please get out of it as soon as possible. I don't want this. It's horrible.
Well, on that note, do you want to move on to some Thrive picks?
Yes. Oh, Thrive Fantasy. If you've never played before, the fancy DFS, you got to run the optimizers, do the whole thing, the traditional, the whatever. It's a confusing game. But if you like prop picks, you like something simple, then just go over to Thrive Fantasy and use promo code HERMS for a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. It's a really fun place. Whether you want to play in the contest, build a lineup of prop bets, compete that way, or just go into the prop lobby and hang out there. You can do so. It's a great app. Have a lot of fun. Have a lot of fun on Thrive Fantasy. Make sure you use that promo code HERMS for a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. And one that kind of stuck out to me, I don't know if you still have it. There's a Gerald Everett prop. So for the Thursday night football game, Chiefs Chargers, we already know Keenan Allen not really going to be involved here. So that's that's already kind of one big thing. I think Gerald Everett did pretty well in what he was, what he did on Sunday. I think that, sans Keenan Allen, I think there's also a pretty good prop for Josh Palmer as well. And that's why I'm not necessarily picking between the two, but that's kind of where I would look immediately. If you have the exact numbers, definitely share. But
so the Gerald Everett one, it's over under 39.5 receiving yards. I think like you, I feel good about the over there. And then the Josh Palmer one is 46.5 total receiving yards.
Yeah. So both pretty good, both easily attainable. But if you're looking just for something kind of gimme to build your parlay, because mind you, Thrive Fantasy, they give out the highest payouts of any of these places. I'm talking higher payouts than FanDuel, higher payouts than Underdog. And all you have to do is just use the promo code HERMS for a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. So if you're looking to start something kind of simple in terms of building a parlay, however many legs, the Everett one, I feel pretty good about. He could clear the over on that total pretty easily without Keenan Allen in the lineup. The Chargers may have to lean on him. We've seen it in the past too. Whenever some of the receivers were banged up, Jared Cook would step up those last couple of years with Herbert throwing him the ball. So it's precedented. It's definitely documented. And Gerald Everett, pretty good. So that's where Herms is leaning. Do you have anything in mind for your prop that you would like to share with the public?
Yeah, so I also have one from the Thursday night game that I think is kind of a gimme. Patrick Mahomes over 0.5 interceptions against the Chargers at home. Look, Mahomes looked great. Threw 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That is awesome. Like, again, truly fantastic. He is a great quarterback. Great quarterbacks still throw interceptions. It happens. And the Chargers picked off Derek Carr, who's like good. He's not Mahomes, but he's good. They picked him off 3 times in week 1. Khalil Mack looked really good. Like that offense, that defense can get pressure on you. And so, like, we've seen Mahomes make some mistakes under pressure because he feels the need, rightfully so to a degree, to put the team on his back, make a play that kind of only he can make, and sometimes even he can't make it. So the idea of him throwing 1 interception against the Chargers, I'm feeling pretty good about that. So I am going to take that. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and include it in my prop lobby bet.
There you go. See, shout out these picks. Shout out you. Shout out me. Shout out Thrive Fantasy. One more time. You just got to use that. You got to use that promo code HERMS. Just do it. 100% match on your first deposit. Do it. Pretty cool place. We're kind of running a little longer here with this episode than I had anticipated. So I'm just going to hand it over to you for your boom bust plays of the week, because we don't need to hear mine. It's fine. What do you have in terms of, because we outlined the qualifiers for this thing last week.
Yep.
If you forgot how
so last week I picked Trevor Lawrence to boom. Whoops.
Yeah.
And Darren Waller to bust. Whoops.
The
finished tight end 7. I feel a little bit better about that one. He only had 6 targets, I think. And in seasons past, he had hovered ahead of that. So again, like the full-on demise that I had perhaps anticipated did not happen. But I think some signs are there that Waller is not a lock to be a target hog as he had been in the past. But this week, my boom pick is Matt Ryan, currently QB 17 in Fantasy Pros' week 2 ECR rankings, 16.1 points. But again, this is more about projecting non-starters to be starters and starters to be non-starters. Carson Wentz was QB3 last week against the Jags. It's Carson Wentz. He still only had a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He did nothing with his legs. I think he had like 12 yards. Matt Ryan can do that. Like Matt Ryan can throw a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio against the Jags with Michael Pittman. Matt Ryan cannot run the ball at all. Like, so maybe he finishes closer to QB 12 than QB 1 because Carson Wentz had 4 touchdowns. Or maybe like he goes off. So I feel pretty good about that one. And then unfortunately, my bust is Aaron Jones. He's currently PPR RB10, 16.3 PPR points, which is a lot.
Yeah.
AJ Dillon led that backfield as we discussed. And he did good with the opportunities he got, did well, rather. And so to me, that signifies, unless he's feeling a little sore or something that we don't know about, there's no reason that they can't lean on him in a similar way. Like, I think they take away from the RBs as a whole if Lazard is healthy, maybe, or they shift around the wide receiver targets a bit. I don't think if Lazard is healthy, magically give Aaron Jones more work and AJ Dillon less.
Yeah.
Anything's possible. But then the other thing, Jones is historically kind of middling against the Bears. So I did the math. On average, if you take his average stats and then assign PPR points to that, he scores 10.86, which isn't the greatest. Again, it's not terrible, but
it's not going to kill you, but
it could be enough to bump him out of fantasy RB starter territory. If we look at this past week and we go to the running backs, the RB 24 was Naheem Hines with 11.4 points. So Aaron Jones, if he manages 10.86, would miss out on being a starter.
Yeah. Now, we're talking flexes here. That's little.
I don't think Aaron Jones is going to be a disaster, but I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he certainly won't be RB10 and that he might not even be RB24. And so that's why I'm going to pick him as my bust this week. And if we look at his production last week against the Vikings, he was RB29 with 10.6 points, kind of in line with what we could historically expect. So again, there's just a lot of signs that point to Aaron Jones simply not getting the opportunity to live up to that ranking. And so that is why I'm highlighting it. It's not so much Aaron Jones is dead, Aaron Jones is crap. It's more just, this isn't the Aaron Jones that your daddy told you about.
That is true. Good analysis. Good show. Also, we got through a lot of really cool information. Hope you kind of like the, interesting format that we decided to go with. We're still, kind of working out the kinks, but, part of the beauty about being on the Fantasy Six Pack Network is that we don't have to be the flagship show. We don't have to go over our rankings, our projections, our everything. We
don't even have to be good.
Exactly.
One's not right.
At any rate, I'm Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at HermsNFL. That is where I do my tweeting and stuff. And you can find my written articles here at fantasysixpack.net, which, again, you just got to fantasysixpack.net/plans. Sign up for the all access. You get the Discord. You get the DFS tools. You get the award-winning rankings. And you get to see some stuff behind the paywall, including my full waiver wire article every single week. Where can people do the internet thing for you?
At Herms NFL might be where you do the tweeting, but this right here, the Lateral Show, is where I do the yeeting and the greeting. That's right, people. We almost missed eats and greets this episode,
my God.
But no. I am here for you. I have not forgotten. You can, as always, check out your boy McLateral, aka McLateral FF on Twitter at McLateral FF for all my fantasy football takes. My articles that are coming out for Fantasy Six Pack. We had the week 1 heat check come out last week that focused largely on production from the final 3 weeks of the 2021 season. I think it went pretty well. Told you to stay away from Davis Mills, which check. Told you to stay away from Rex Burkhead, which I stand by. We still saw a lot of the same issues. He just got a ton of targets. And so you have to buy that those targets are still going to come. And I just don't. And then I told you to take KJ Osborne, and I think it may take a little time to see if that ends up being good advice. But what we'll also take a little time is me to write my article this week, which you should expect to drop on Fantasy Six Pack on Saturday. So stay tuned for that. We will probably be looking largely at week 1 data for that. It's tough to get the sample sizes right when it's only been 1 week into the season. So we'll probably take week 1 data and then try and put it against some late season data from last season, or if there's a rookie involved, maybe looking at some of their college numbers. It'll be a fun exercise for sure. As the season goes on, it'll be a lot easier for us to just pull that beautiful 3-week window that I love to use so much for that article. Aside from that, you can go to @MacMcMillanATL on Twitter, which is where I retweet all my Tom's Guide stuff, where I talk about the other kind of football and all those good things, including the fact that the owner of Patagonia just gave away the company, all $3 billion of it today. Just gave it to a charitable organization.
Not bad.
Which is absolutely wild. Shout out to that dude. And shout out to you all for listening to this here pod.
And thank you for watching the video. If you did, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe, do the thing. You can find the show on Twitter @TheLateralFF. Let's go!
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.